everybody, welcome back to another video. As some of you may know, there was recently a very big tournament in Las Vegas called the 34th North American Open. I participated in this tournament in the U1700 section and got 2.5 points. I won one, I drew one, I got one bye, and I lost 4 games. And I will be reviewing these 4 games that I lost today. So let's get right on into the video. In my first game, I played against Evan Zhong. His rating was around 1600, and I was white. So the game started with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, bishop c5, b4, the Evans Gambit, bishop takes b4, c3, bishop to a5, d4, d6, and castles. In this position, d6, I only had one good move, and that good move was queen to b3, attacking the f7 square and forcing my opponent to play queen to e7. After queen to e7, I could play d5, forcing the knight to move away, and then I could play queen to b5 check, winning the bishop. In this position, the only good move for black is knight to d4, sacrificing the knight. I cannot play queen to b5 check now, and if I try play queen to e4 check, he can block with the queen. Now, if I take bishop takes, knight takes, pawn takes, black is up a pawn, and he is probably going to capture the c3 pawn on the next move. Castles is a worse move, which allows for bishop to g4, pinning my knight to the queen. Instead, my opponent played knight to f6. I played queen to a4, threatening pawn to d5, winning the knight. He played a6, which is a mistake. Now I have the opportunity to play bishop to d5, which pins the knight, which attacks the pinned knight on the king. And if he plays bishop to d7 or any other move to defend the knight, I can take it. They take back, and I take their bishop. Their knight was defended, so and the knight is also pinned, which means that the knight is very important in this position. However, in this position, I chose to play d5, which also attacks the knight, but allows pawn to b5. I played bishop takes b5, which I thought would win a pawn. A takes, queen takes, and now my opponent played castles. Even though this move lets me take back the knight with my queen, this weakens it and allows for future attacks on it, which you'll see later in this game. Bishop to a6 forces the rook to move away, rook to e1, queen to b8, threatening bishop to b5, knight to a3, bishop to d4, attacking e3, and threatening rook to a6, knight to c4, bishop takes c3, knight to b6, bishop takes a1, knight takes a8, queen takes pawn, queen to b8, which offers a queen trade, but I refused with queen to c6. Rook to c8, queen to a4, and bishop to c3, trapping the rook on the next move. Rook d1, bishop to e2, trapping the rook, and bishop to a3. After takes, and bishop to b2, I resigned in this position because on the next move, Even if I play bishop takes, queen takes, my opponent will then play rook to c1, which is either a checkmate or wins material. Now I'll be reviewing my next game, which I played black against Eric Xiao, who is rated 1517. The game started with d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight to c3, d5, c takes, knight takes, e4, knight takes c3, b takes c3, bishop to g7, and bishop to d3. First mistake of the whole game. I played castles, knight to e2, and I played knight to c6. This is a mistake because it allows e5, which blocks the bishop off from its strong diagonal and expands his space on my side. Instead, a better move would have been c5, which directly attacks the center and forces my opponent to make a decision whether to advance or to take. In this position, the best move is e5 still, but this allows for c takes d4 and c takes d4, which weakens the a5 e1 diagonal. Instead, I played knight to c6, and my opponent missed the move e5 and instead played bishop to e3. I played bishop to d7, which allows for e5 again. A better move would have been e5, pawn to e5, which attacks the d4 square and prevents my opponent from playing e5. Instead, I played bishop to d7, and my opponent missed the move e5 for the second time this game, playing castles. Now, I played e6, which still allows for e5. But now e5 is not the best move because my knight can go to e7 and capitalize on strong squares on f5 and d5. My opponent played queen to d2, threatening bishop to h6, trading off his weaker dark squared bishop for my stronger dark squared bishop. I played queen to e7, rook a to b1, attacking the b7 pawn, and knight to d8. Now my knight is attacking the b7 pawn, but this puts my knight in a bad position and removes the connection of rooks. My opponent played bishop to h6, a mistake, and I played pawn to e5. Bishop takes, king takes, f4. I played e takes d4. A better move would have been f6, providing support on the e5 pawn instead of trading it off for one of his pawns. I played e takes d4, c takes d4, and bishop c6, another mistake. This allows for d5, pushing my bishop away, and bishop to d7. Queen to c3, check, forks the king and the c7 pawn. I play king to g8, and queen takes c7. Now, my opponent is winning because he is up a pawn. Rook to c8, queen to a5, f5, e5, and rook to c5. My opponent played queen takes a7, and I played bishop to c8, the last mistake of the game. My opponent played d6, removing my queen's connection from the c5 rook, queen to e6, and queen takes c5. In this position, I resigned because I was down a rook, and the position is completely lost. In the third game, I played against W. David Lewis as black. His rating was 1590 as of the game. d4, knight f6, bishop f4, g6, e3, bishop g7, h4, h5, bishop to e2, d6, knight c3, knight bd7, knight f3, a6, and queen to d2. In this position, this allows me to play b5, which prevents the bishop from going to c4 and makes it stay there for pretty much the rest of the game. Instead, I played c5 instead of b5, offering to trade the d pawn for the c pawn and attacking the center. Castles, castles, rook f to e1. This move allows for b5 again, which keeps the bishop on e2 for pretty much the rest of the game. However, I missed b5 for the second time this game, and instead played knight to e8, trying to maneuver my knight to c7 and then to e6. Rook a d1, knight c7, bishop to g3, b5. I finally played b5, preventing the bishop from going to c4. a3, knight to e6, knight to e4, bishop to b7, attacking the e4 knight. Knight e to g5, knight takes, c takes d4, e takes d4, rook c8, knight to f3, knight to f6, bishop to h2. And this is how the position stayed for a few more moves until I played bishop to h6, attacking the queen and forcing it to move away. Now the queen is removed from its perch on c1, and the pawn on c3 is not pinned anymore after queen to b1. Rook f to c8, rook and knight to h2, which is a mistake because it allows bishop to d5, putting the bishop upon two strong diagonals and threatening to attack the rook with bishop to b3. I instead play knight takes h2, bishop takes h2, and king to g7 to protect the h6. Bishop d3, queen g4, and bishop to g3, which is the only good move in this position. Now I played bishop to f4. I thought this was a great move because it attacks the bishop, and if it moves away, then I have checkmate in one with queen to xg2 checkmate. However, I missed the move bishop to e2, forcing the queen to move away and then taking the bishop on the next move. Queen e6, bishop takes, and the rest of the game is pretty much history. They traded off the pieces and then got their queen and rook on the e-file. Then they attacked my king and forced off the trade of the queen and rooks. And then they had two connected passed pawns. I resigned in this position. Last but not least, in my last game, I played against Talibek Abkiev, who was rated 1,500 as white. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop to c4, bishop to c5, b4, bishop takes b4, c3, and bishop to a5. d4, e takes, castles, and d3. This allows for queen to b3, attacking the f7 pawn. Queen to e7 is a mistake because it allows for e5, but I did not play e5. I instead played knight b to d2, which missed the move e5. My plan was to defend the e4 pawn, defend the f3 knight, and then maybe move my bishop to a3, connecting the rooks. Knight to h6, bishop to a3, d6, e5, and castles. E takes, c takes, rook f to e1, queen to d8, bishop takes d3, bishop to f5, offering a trade of the bishops. Bishop takes, knight takes, queen takes b7, taking the free pawn on b7. Bishop takes c3, allowing for queen takes c6. Whoops. Queen takes c6. I instead played rook a to c1, which allows my opponent to play bishop takes d2, knight takes, and then knight to e5, threatening knight to d3. I, however, did not see this move and played knight to e4, attacking the d6 pawn. Knight to d3, knight takes d6, knight takes, bishop takes, queen takes, and rook a to d1. This was my plan behind the move, knight takes d6, but I did not see the move queen to g6. I played queen to b1, knight takes e1, and queen to b3. Then my opponent played the obvious mate in 1, queen to g2, check, mate. Thank you everybody for watching this video. I hope to see you next week, and I hope you have a great holidays as the New Year and Christmas come by. Bye!